Hello, I'm Rory McKiernan and welcome to the Love and Courage podcast. Love and Courage is independent community-supported media for social change. Thanks to all of you who have been spreading the word and to the fantastic donors and patrons who chip in on an ongoing basis to put fuel in the Love and Courage fire. Together we've helped the podcast hit the #1 spot on iTunes and reach and inspire people all over the world as part of a real community for change. A special mention for my friends at Include who offer discounted software and technology consultancy for non-profits in Ireland and internationally. See more at enclude.ie, that's enclude.ie. Also, special thanks to monthly patrons Simon Ward, Dara Doyle, Ronan Brannigan, Megan Brown, Darren Ryan, Sophia Duffy, Davy Ward, Eamon Stack, Anne Keenahan, Stephen Kelleher, Ruth McKenna, Niall Doherty, Dermot Kirsten and Ray McGee, and to all who've chipped in on a once-off basis also. You can find out more about the podcast, send me feedback, inquire about Love and Courage talks, workshops and events, sign up for newsletter updates and make a financial contribution, however small, at loveandcourage.org, and on Twitter it's at loveandcourage. Thanks again for all your support, it really is appreciated. Enjoy the podcast.
When you create the conditions for people to participate, when you create the conditions for people to become empowered, to be empowered, and then you create the conditions for collective action, and you're clear what's the change you're looking for, change happens.
My guest in this episode is Siobhán O'Donoghue. Siobhán is one of Ireland's leading community change makers. For over 20 years, she has been blazing a trail to help improve the lives of others. Originally from County Clare in the west of Ireland, Siobhán is a former nurse who eventually got involved in youth and community work and in advocating for travellers' rights. She is a founding director of the Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland, which she built up over 11 years, and more recently she has become the founding director of the Uplift campaigning organisation, which has become one of Ireland's most influential forces for people-powered change. I've been part of Uplift's founding story over the past few years, and I currently sit on the board. And in the course of all of this, I've had the really good fortune to get to know Siobhán and to learn a lot from her. She constantly amazes me with her endless energy, enthusiasm and dedication. And what I really love about her is that she manages to keep smiling and to have fun in the midst of taking on so many campaigns and causes. Now, the sound quality in this interview isn't particularly great, so please forgive me for this, but rest assured that you won't regret listening to this fascinating chat with the wonderful Siobhán O'Donoghue. Siobhán, thanks very much for joining me on the podcast today. How is life with you?
Great.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
How was your day? I know you're always running around 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, so today was like probably a reflection of the rest of my life is basically juggling and managing to connect with lots of people and get lots of work done, and at the same time have time to talk to people properly.
So you're back in Dublin, and you've recently moved from Dublin to West Cork, and we're now here in the Uplift offices in Dame Street, Dublin. So we were just chatting before the interview and thinking that, or we were saying rather, that your days in Dublin are probably way more intensive because you're only here for a few times every month. And
it's jam-packed because at the end of the day, you have to, like, meeting people is very important. So a lot of work gets done in Dublin, so when I'm here I just have to make the time to meet people and sit down and plan work out.
And tell me about the move to West Cork now. This is intriguing me because you've been living in Dublin a long time,
but I'm a country girl, you see.
I'm
a country girl. I've always been really clear about that. When I moved to Dublin in 2001, from Galway actually, and Galway is a city, but it never felt like a city. I said, okay, I'll stay here for 2 years, and then the years went by, and 15 years later, I was like, no, it's time to move. It's definitely time to move. And we decided we were going to move 2 years ago because my son was going to be transitioning into secondary school. I said, what a brilliant time to actually move. So West Cork was always a place that has appealed to me. I've go there every year, often twice a year, and it has everything that I just love about living, or like a community. There's a lot of diversity there. There's a lot of kind of interesting people with lots of ideas. It's very creative. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful. The local school in Skull is just amazing. I mean, it's the local community school. The kids go sailing on a Saturday. There's a big emphasis on social learning and.
So it sounds like a place with a really strong, vibrant community spirit.
Very, very,
and
very strong.
you just landed straight into that. Well, obviously you've been coming and going for years. And did you have that in Dublin?
Yeah, I have a very strong community in Dublin too. I mean, I would say I have communities at different levels in my life. I have, I mean, and certainly where I lived in Chapel Lizard, I definitely had a really great kind of community of people around me that I was connected to. But I've always seen communities in communities of interest, communities of, kind of phases of my life. But so geographical community never really, funnily enough, has never really bothered me that much. But for some reason, and I think it's to do with actually the children, I felt it was going to be really important for them to to be connected into a community that actually is kind of healthy and kind of helps them thrive, as opposed to, I find actually basically young fellas growing up in Dublin to be a very tough environment for kids in Dublin, actually, I think.
And that probably points to rural-urban divide in general.
Yeah.
I mean, urban living can be tough.
It's tough, and I think I was really clear that, say for my son, that he just, he doesn't like school that much. He's never going to be in that kind of academic world. So his world is going to be very much the community he lives in, and he's outside of school. And I could see over the last few years it's just getting tougher and harder to find your way in that world, in that community, especially for young people, being stopped by the guards on a regular basis.
And he's only he's very young.
Oh, he's been stopped and searched by the guards since he was 8.
Oh wow!
It's a big issue in Dublin. Yeah. So anyway, that's not the only reason, but also I just knew that being in a smaller communities, smaller environment, smaller community environment, is really healthy, I think, and it just suited us all. We wanted to go. And I suppose another thing for me is Dublin is a bubble, and even in terms of work and the kind of political kind of world, it's very insidery. It's like everything, all roads lead to Dublin, and I have a kind of instinctive, I want to push against that, and which is kind of very much in keeping with Uplift and kind of the direction we've all been going in, is actually there's something about just like the kind of living on the edge. And I've always kind of been part of a kind of a motto for years, for decades now, in terms of the work I've been involved in the Migrant Rights Centre, particularly the Migrant Rights Centre, is that where we position ourselves is actually really important. So they're really the best place to position ourselves on the edge, and it keeps you kind of conscious about what you're doing. It keeps you alert, working with people who live and work on the edge. While we're positioned on the edge, it really forces kind of creativity, innovation, and it just takes away that cozy feeling. So actually, for me, even the physical kind of act of actually going to live on the edge of Ireland, basically the southern western coast point of Ireland,
of Europe even.
Yeah. There's something edgy about that, which I really appeals to me, and I'm loving it. I absolutely love it. There.
You have me sold here. So we've already used the word community maybe a dozen times, and that's probably no surprise, because at the heart of it all, you're essentially a community worker. Your background is community worker. But I've known you bits over the years, and obviously we work together with Uplift and everything, but I don't know that much about how the genius was born, or I'm just setting you up here, but no, I think you studied nursing, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. But let's go backwards. Tell me what kind of person you were when you were okay, so you mentioned Luke being 8 there. So when you were 8, what was happening
Well, I was born in Manchester, and I was about 5 when we came back to West Clare.
So you're English?
So that's something
debatable.
Yeah,
okay.
I was conceived in Ireland.
You're multi-racial identity.
So I actually have a very distinct memory of arriving in West Clare.
Oh,
actually,
really?
yeah, I do.
At what age?
I was about 4.5, nearly 5. Yeah, just before I went to school. So I actually have that, a distinct memory.
I suppose Manchester to West Clare is a pretty stark contrast.
Yeah. And I remember running through fields. I had this really strong memory of running, just like running wild through fields. And apparently that is what we did when we arrived in West Clare, and cats and dogs weren't seen for months afterwards because we terrified them. And
so usually these wild urban kids descended from Manchester into the fields.
Yeah,
sounds very idyllic. Oh, he's running through the rain.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, my childhood, we actually there was a lot of poverty in my family because there wasn't. We were living in poverty, but
your parents had emigrated. I'm guessing here your parents were Irish.
Yeah,
they emigrated to Manchester.
So they were both from West Clare. Went to Manchester, eloped basically. Had 3 children.
Did they need to elope? Was there?
My mother was pregnant.
Okay.
Basically, and they just took off. And and I tell you, that kind of tells you something how they're quite feisty. My mother was quite feisty, basically. They just said, "Let's go and do our own thing and make our own way." And they ended up coming back with 3 children. And I think it's really interesting. My mother talks about coming home and with the 3 of us and. Borrowing money to buy new clothes to come home, because when you're an immigrant you're not allowed to be a failure, and you have to, if you leave you have to succeed. You're not allowed to fail. And it's funny because when the Migrant Rights Centre, I just repeatedly saw that over and over and over again, that experience of people struggling here, but they managed to get home for a holiday, and they would be, the story of their lives, the narrative of what was their lives was completely different to the reality in front of us here. And my mother would say that's exactly what it was for them as well. So it was tough. I mean, growing up was tough in our house. We didn't even have an indoor toilet. We had nothing. I remember that we didn't have running water for years. So it was pretty tough. But
there's West Clare with the likes of Ennis. It's a big enough town. But then what part of West Clare was
it? Was Kilmurray, McMahon, Labashida. It's not far from where the Money Point is, about 10 miles from Kilrush.
Okay.
So it was. But it was a great. I mean, there was lots of great things going for it as well. So I went to school. I was so obviously I remember being in school, and I had a tough time in school. I was bullied really badly, to the point where I actually had to leave school and stay out of school for about 4 or 5 months.
Was there a particular reason for the bullying?
Oh, basically completely dysfunctional. 2 teacher, brother and sister running the schools, and I have to be very careful, obviously, what I say, but they were not able to manage. And basically, I was the only girl in the class, and I was just basically beaten up on a daily basis, to the point where I actually had to, I was not able to go to school for months. I was so
that's a sort of an insight into how rural life can be equally as tough as the urban life, because we were talking about Luke and Dublin, and because there's no ideal scenario in our urban or rural circumstances.
Absolutely. I mean, all the same class divisions and everything exists in both urban and rural life. It's just obviously the environments are quite different. So that was a very defining part of my life when I was about 7 or 8. Actually.
What did your parents do for any?
They were farmers, small farmers.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is the picture that I'm getting is one of almost semi-peasant farming in the way that this is eking out a living off the land.
Yeah, in the early days, and then they did okay. I mean, then was after when I was in my kind of teenage years, things started to improve, and that was to do with kind of, I suppose, a lot of kind of Europe support, farmer support, grants, and the farm began to develop, and we began to become more comfortable. Yeah. And our family as well, there was even though we were kind of we were quite we didn't have much cash, if you know what I mean, but there was a strong that kind of middle class ethos of education being a way out. You know, so we were yeah, I remember I knew we were fairly well respected in the area. We had the name of being smart, which was like ridiculous, because I was the other thing part for me going to school was I would have been considered like a slow learner in school, in primary school, because I was like way behind everybody. But it was like, it's funny how culturally a family gets known to be, they're like, they're kind of smart or something, which was ridiculous because it was completely unwarranted.
And they must have had a thread somewhere.
I think my dad would have been involved in quizzes, and my mother had been educated. And
so there are curious people that were obviously interested in the world. And,
my father left school when he was 13, but like I would always say that he was a frustrated intellect, really. You know, it's only in the latter years of his life that he really kind of found his way again in terms of, you know, getting involved in the historic society and all kinds of different community events and activities. He was a real community leader before he died, basically, and he had been all his life. He'd been a small farmer and the drudgery of that, and then he never saw. He was never really involved in anything. In his earlier years, he had been involved in those kind of quizzes, you know, those quizzes and stuff like that. But
and were they, you know, did they sort of slot into society, or were they in any way agitating? You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. So I mean, people always say, you know, where did you get your kind of fighting spirit from? I mean, I would say definitely from my mother. Definitely, my mother. Like, I remember, you know, travellers coming to the door and getting a welcome that they wouldn't have gotten in any of the neighbours' houses. I remember, like, she was a very, she was very, very clear about, you know, treating people well and with respect, and was a very, and is a kind of person that, you know, like when my friends and my cousins were running away from home, they ran to our house, to my mother, basically, because she would just take people in and listen, and she has a great spirit and authority about her, and people just like gravitated towards her. So I was very close to my mother, very, very close. So I kind of grew up with this kind of experience. I think in terms of what defining frames for my life, I always think of power. Power is, I think the world through a lens of kind of how power is organised and everything. And like one of my early experiences, like I think as a child, it's the first time you experience power. Usually power over you because you're a child, and adults have more power than you. So when I was a kid, I would have, like, my relationship with my mother was very much one of my mother being in a position of power, but very much using her power in a very empowering way with me. So and the others. So I kind of learned that was a great introduction. I also got all kinds of other negative experiences of power as a kid growing up, but with my mother, it was very, I understood what it meant to be for an adult to share power with you.
And do you think that was a case of a clear example of a strong female role model, that you didn't necessarily have that same barrier when it came to being a strong woman in the world? Or was that not necessarily?
I never really thought about it, you see. I mean, I never had there was no discussion about any of these things, like when we were growing up in our house. Like you just treated people with respect and dignity. Dignity was important, and you tried your best, and you know, there was a lot of, but there was no deep analysis or ideology or anything like that, you know.
Just core values.
Core values, very much values.
Okay, so fast forward then to when you're, say, 16, 17, you're probably in your last year of school or thereabouts. What was happening then?
I mean, secondary school, I actually really liked secondary school because, I mean, as I said earlier on, I was actually, I think I would have been considered a slow learner. I remember the teacher saying that in school. So I never, like, I was always felt I was completely outside of the mainstream in terms of what students could do. I always felt I was out. I didn't know half what was going on in the action in terms of just getting by in terms of schoolwork. But in secondary school, I really came into my own a bit. I discovered boys. and discovered that actually I was popular and I could have good fun, and I had some very good friends at school, and I went to a great school. I went to a school where there was loads of really great things going on, from musicals to like teachers with really good relationships with, really good conversations. I remember my like English, Leaving Cert English, where we had a nun and who basically introduced us to Buddhism, introduced us to Bob Dylan, I always remember reading the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Mechanics Maintenance, where we discussed love, and she used to come into the classroom and take her habit off, and she'd say, don't be shocked, girls, and she opened our eyes to a whole other world. So I had a great time in school. Didn't get great results, but it wasn't ever going to be about that. So in that kind of like 16, 17, I was I didn't have that kind of, I wasn't troubled, put it that way. Adolescence suited me.
Yeah.
In the way it doesn't others.
Yeah, I hear you. What was the name of the school, just so I know?
The Convent of Mercy in Kilrush.
And the name of the nun?
Gerard Rush. No longer a nun.
You never know who's going to hear this podcast.
Yeah. She was brilliant. I remember sending her a message when I was as an adult saying thank you.
That's great. Yeah, I was kind of curious to know that because and I actually had a similar opportunity once. I can't remember how it came about, but I think it was the Irish Times were looking for people to say something about teachers that had influenced them.
Yeah.
So they got me to actually go and then meet one of my old teachers, and we got our photo taken together, and I was able to say a few words about him, and it got into the Irish Times. And but quite often there are those teachers and they don't necessarily get thanked.
Yeah.
And I know from youth work or community work as well that you put your best into it, but you don't necessarily get the thanks, and it may never come, and that's totally fine. That's part of the deal. But it is great to then meet someone 10 years later and they go, do you know that conversation?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I think it makes you realise how precious time is with people and how important it is to give time.
Yeah, especially for younger folk.
Yeah,
or for anybody.
It's really important.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you one story because I think it was actually a defining moment for me when I was a kid, actually, about the ability to actually get what you want. Like to learn, in terms of, but like power, like I remember when actually that time I was away out of school because I'd been bullied so badly and I was too traumatized to go near the school, and they had to move me to a different school. But there was we were on a small farm, and there was a whole load of young male bullocks who had to be castrated, and I basically managed to stop the whole process because I was an animal lover and I just wouldn't let them do it. And I always remember like going out in front of all these men and saying no. And the thing was, my father listened to me, and he actually basically had to cancel it, and they had to, of course, get me out the following away from the farm and then bring them all back again. But I always remember being the bravery, being feeling brave and powerful as a kid, that actually I could stop this from happening.
I wish there was a photograph of that happening. I can see this iconic photo of you running out in front of it.
And I remember I stopped killing chickens another day, and I was thinking like, Dad, listen.
And you weren't necessarily a vegetarian, because there weren't many.
I used to try and be a vegetarian, but it just didn't work out very well. Yeah. But
you'd have
oh my God, I was passionate about animals basically.
Right. Yeah.
But I just remember that feeling of being powerful, and I was small. I was only about 8, and I just being so determined. But I always really appreciated the fact that Dad listened.
Yeah.
He took me seriously.
Which is a big deal, because you're going against culture, you're going against local farmers.
Oh yeah.
The whole.
Yeah. And there used to be coursing up the road in the, a good few miles up the road were Hare coursing, and they used to have to watch me, because they were afraid that I was going to go and let the hares out, and they couldn't let. We had 2 greyhounds at home, and I think my dad thought that they were going to go coursing. No way was I letting that happen.
So you're
we ended up with two greyhounds that were like pets, essentially.
That's fantastic. Well, you know your karma is good if you ever come back as an animal or something like that. So you're happy, busy with all your boyfriends and everything.
I know, it's true.
And then you decide to become a nurse. Is that right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, so when I was going to school this is like I was doing my leaving cert in 1985, right? So your choices were fairly set out for you. You either became a teacher, you became a nurse, you joined the civil service, or you went to the technical college and became a secretary, or you left school and worked in a shop.
Or you emigrated with...
Most of my class immigrated.
Most, so you're talking 70-80%.
Yeah. I actually got a scholarship to go to the US to train as a nurse after my leaving cert, and I turned it down. Which was
How did you even get
when
that?
Most of my friends were going undocumented, borrowing £3,000 to put into your bank account to prove when you were going to immigration that you were on your holidays and then paying that back.
So,
and
hang on, I didn't even know there were scholarships back then.
It was a family scholarship in the US.
Amazing.
And they offered it to me.
So you were handed the golden ticket,
I was handed the golden ticket,
from rural West Clare to California or wherever it is.
It would have been Chicago.
Right, Chicago, right. You're walking into, you're set for life in one way.
To train as a nurse, which is what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So
I was so connected to Ireland, to home. I just couldn't leave. I just really could. I mean, it was remarkable. It's kind of, there's not a whole lot of logic to it, because the same thing happened to me about 5 years later when I actually did qualify as a nurse in Ireland, and again late 80s, every nurse in the country was immigrating, and all my friends were immigrating, and I had job offers in from the UK, and they were all leaving, and I just said, I made a decision, I was not going. Somehow or another I just was going to stay put, and I was the only one that didn't go.
So you're obviously like anchored in not just to the country and the land, but that again, does it bring us back to that sense of community and family and core value stuff?
I mean, it's funny. I find it because I love going overseas. I love all of that, but I have a very strong connection with Ireland, which is I find it hard to explain, to be honest.
Well, you love Ireland.
I love it. Yeah, I love the people. I love being here. But I mean, I'm not naive about it either. There's loads of things about it that I don't like, but I mean, I'm quite realistic about it. But yeah, I mean, when I was faced with the choice, I said no. So
you've travelled a fair bit. You've been to a number of countries, and let's say, from time to time I've been to somewhere like China or elsewhere where somebody will say, well, where is Ireland, or what is Ireland? There are people on the planet that have never heard of Ireland. They have no idea what it is, apart from maybe at best they might know about Rory McIlroy or something. But if you were to meet one of those people, how would you explain Ireland in the positive light? Because we don't want to tell them all our bad stuff. Like, what are the things that you would identify as singularly special about Ireland?
I mean, I find it hard to answer that question, because I'm hesitant about answering that question, because in some ways it's nearly like profiling. In some ways, I suppose I love the fact that it's local. That everything's local. There's
okay, so there's scale.
There's scale.
It's a small island. It's a tiny island.
Living on an island.
We can go. I find that when I go over to the US and Australia and different places, they can't go anywhere. No. It takes them 10 hours to get from A to B.
Yeah.
We can drive coast to coast in 3 hours, east to west, or 5 hours. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I feel sometimes I'm full of contradictions, right? Because I'm a very international person. I worked in global migration issues for 30 years. I don't like the parochial thing at all. But I feel full of contradictions, and I think some of it is to do with I really value community and people. I love people, and even when when I go overseas and I'm a tourist, I always try and find a way of not being a tourist. So I have to get to talk to somebody or get familiar with, fit in some way. And I think that's very important for me. I need to feel I fit in.
Connection.
I have to feel the connection. I also think that I am the kind of person that I probably take quite a lot of risks in my life with what I do, basically, and where I put myself and all of that. So there's something about the counter. The counter of that is actually having a secure base at home and be very comfortable in my own skin where I live, or and I think Ireland, for me, I'm very comfortable in my own skin in Ireland. Just really am. So which I think gives me a certain amount of freedom to kind of push the boat out as well. So it's that kind of the I don't know, yin and yang, or whatever you want to call it. And I have no desire to live anywhere else. I really honestly had I couldn't. So why would I want to go? Probably loneliness. I probably have an innate fear of being lonely. I've never been lonely in my life, never. And I think I would probably cushion myself. I was probably cushioning myself against that as well.
And that's no small thing, because there's increasingly research around loneliness, and in today's society, like, we all know the narrative about technology bringing us together and keeping us apart, and Facebook and all of that. But we've had several cases in Ireland of people dying in their houses, older people, and more recently, I think a couple of deaf brothers died in their house, and they'd been there for days, in some cases weeks, because the neighbours aren't known. And I don't know all my neighbours, or I don't know many of them at all. And it's a real thing. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's horrible. It's a horrible thing to be. It doesn't cost that to fix it either. No. And I'd say I would be the kind of person, I'd be afraid of that. I'd be afraid of ending up finding myself alone, because I just like. I'd say you're going to be. It's not going to happen. There's no chance of that. So Siobhán, you said no way, Chicago. That's not happening. Yeah. And where you went? I went to Tralee to become a nurse. Tralee, Kerry. You went to Kerry. Yeah, and that is where if I think about my life up to that point, where it was grand. It was like I fitted in, but I also knew I had other ideas going on, and I got on fine in school. I was fitted. I was a good girl. I was very likable. People liked me. Teachers liked me. Students, I had loads of friends. I had no, I was actually really good. I didn't rock the boat as well. I was one of those really nice girls. Good I was not a troublemaker at all. I landed as a student nurse into student nurse school, and I was getting whammed over there, with authority. And I suddenly realised, and because I was told on a regular basis, that I had a problem with authority. And I was like, Jesus, how did I manage to get to this age of be really deal with all kinds of authority? I have never had any problem, and suddenly I was just in trouble every single day. I was a troublemaker. I was classed as a troublemaker, and partly I realised it was because I started to ask questions. I refused to toe the line in a very particular way, not consciously thinking about this. Just purely I just it just wasn't consistent with my values. Not as a nurse, care for people, to really treat people with respect, and I love people, so. To me, nursing was about caring, and I realised very quickly in this system, nursing wasn't anything to do with caring. It was all to do about kind of keeping the system ticking over, and there was an awful lot of bullying going on. There was a lot of, people were treated so badly. Nurses were treated, as students and nurses, we were treated so badly. Now, we also bucked the system and just found ways to break all of the rules, especially we were controlled. I suppose the thing was I suddenly found myself as a student nurse in what was nearly considered to be it was nearly like being in a seminary.
or a novice nun. You had to be in at a certain time. You had to apply for late night passes, one a week, to go to stay at 2 o'clock. And we were like, I was 18. And
Where did church run in the hospital?
No.
Okay.
No, but this was like it was run as if student nurses were like, you know, like, I don't know, we're like supposed to be virgins, and so supposed to be in a very particular kind of a profile or a lifestyle we were expected to have.
So was there a defining moment where you really came up against it and had to kind of... Did a battle ensue? My parents were called down once, and my mother, basically, they tried to really tell my parents that I was a serious troublemaker, and my mum and dad. My dad was quite kind of, he would kowtow to authority a bit, you know. They left the room, and my mother said to Dad, "You go on there, I'll meet you in the car." And she went back into the room, and she faced us, the matron and the two sister matrons, like, you know, and she said she'd basically give them a dressing down and told them that they had their complete wrong impression of me, and that actually I can't remember what she said. I wasn't in the room, but she did. So I'm going to guess that you scraped through, you got through, you qualified, and you got a job.
I got one of the best results, which is, so this is I tell you now, oh my God, this is like, basically before my final exams, I was dragged down to the matron's office, met with the assistant matrons and the second matron, and basically said, "Nurse O'Donoghue, you are going to let this hospital down." And I was like, "What do you mean?" "We are concerned that you're going to fail your exams and you will disgrace this hospital." And I was like, "I haven't even done the exams yet." "Well, we're just warning you that we believe that you're going to let this hospital down." So I was like, basically. Anyway, I went off, and I didn't say that to them, but I studied, and I got really good exam results, but I didn't, like, in the way the nursing results came out, you either got, like, it was like a first or you passed. So I didn't get the first because I didn't bother with studying for the oral, so I didn't get the first. So you were supposed to go and get your final results, pick them up and look at them, and I didn't bother because, as far as I was concerned, I didn't need to, it was fine. And then they called me down about a month later and said, "Nurse O'Donoghue, you did particularly well in your exams." And I was like, "Yeah, I passed. You told me I wouldn't, and I did. But you did very well." And I'm like, "Yeah. And Nurse O'Donoghue, have you been to collect your results yet?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, I got S for not collecting my results. So that would have been that kind of stuff happened on a regular basis. So there was
a constant tension here, right? Yeah. And like, I want to jump to the point of where I'm going to fast forward a little bit into where you decided that nursing just ultimately wasn't for you.
Yeah, I mean, about halfway through, I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. I couldn't stick the system. I joined the wrong union. So in those days, the ITGW, the precursor to SITU, was organising. I joined that union. Everybody else, a lot of others, joined the INO, the Nurses Association. At that stage, that was a bit more. It was like a professional body. Okay. It was the done thing to do. Okay. It wasn't at all militant or.
So did you join because you were interested in rights?
I think it was a bit of opportunism. Okay. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time.
And how did this connect then to your transition into community?
I went to the strike, basically.
Okay, right.
So there was strikes, and we weren't allowed to go as student nurses, and I just remember organising my day off to make sure that I was going to go. The other thing that happened was, like, doctors were the authority of doctors and the control of doctors, and there were some really bad consultants who I remember one, it was an obstetrician who ended up in Cork several times afterwards. I took him on one day as a student nurse, which he didn't do. And then I also, I suppose, working with people who, I remember, working with people, victims of domestic violence, for example, and poverty, just witnessing poverty, witnessing violence, witnessing mental health issues, young women getting pregnant, and all kinds of like hidden pregnancies and addiction, and I was seeing all of this as a nurse, and kind of like beginning to kind of, there's something more here.
Join the dots a little bit. Yeah.
But and so then I fell in love with this guy who had been a youth worker, and I was like, oh my God, you can get a job to working with young people. And I was like, I want to do that. So basically everybody went off to England and I left nursing, and I used a bit of creative writing with the help of my boyfriend to formulate a story about why I'd be good doing youth work, and started to put it into the Clare Youth Service. And Sean Sexton was a priest who ran the Clare Youth Service at the time, and he called me in, and sure, he knew within 5 minutes that I hadn't a clue what I was talking about. I'd never even been in a youth club as a kid.
Yeah, look, my experience is that some of the best youth workers don't necessarily come straight out of youth work college. They come from different directions.
He gave me a break basically.
Yeah.
And then I was like, at that stage, I was like 21, 22, 23, 22, 23, and I loved it. Oh my God, I just loved this, work, and I was on basically a FOS scheme, the equivalent of a FOS scheme, CE scheme. It wasn't called CE.
It was kind of community employment. How long did you do that for?
So I did that for a year, and again, talk about luck, meeting good people along the way. And I remember Sean called me into his office one day, and he went like, Siobhán, there is a youth work job coming up here. If you go for that job, you will get it. However, he says, I think you will be bored within a year, and then you will have to think about where are you then. He said, what I would love you to do is go to Maynooth, train as a community youth worker. If you want to come back here, you've got a job.
Oh, so he became a mentor figure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and he basically made it possible for me to go to Maynooth. And I would have jumped at it. Like the idea of getting a job, like a proper paid youth work job, I would have jumped at it. But I really took what he said seriously, and I realised that I actually needed to make that commitment and go back to college. And that's when I really, in some ways, like going to Maynooth, where I always describe it as like, it was like coming home.
Yeah, no, I hear where you're coming from, because Maynooth, it definitely, I can see you in Maynooth, because there is that real culture of community work still alive there. It's very vibrant, and you meet some incredible people coming out of there. And I think I recall that you did some work with travellers, did you?
Well, that was it. So I was in Maynooth for 2 years, and that's where I kind of like I kind of become very clear about my values, how my values aligned with ideology and the practice of doing the work. So after I left Maynooth, the first job I got, which I basically pushed into by Neil Crowley, Stacey Crickley and John O'Connell, was working in Limerick, and I helped I had found the Limerick Travellers Development Group, and I will never forget that experience, because it was like literally going into a battleground. Like, travellers were hated in Limerick City. There was the only work that was happening with travellers was a very charity. Like, I was employed with the Vincent de Paul when I started there, where basically my first meeting with my management committee, where we actually all sat and said prayers for the first 5 minutes, and they handed the pocket around to put donations into, and I was like, and I'm like this red radical from Maynooth, kind of like ready to take on the world, and I'm like, holy moly, where have I landed? And anyway, we started. They were great people. They knew they needed somebody like me, so we had to negotiate that. But the hostility towards travellers in the city was just phenomenal. But we grew and created an amazing, amazing organisation. We got sites built. We got the first primary healthcare project in the country. We really moved like traveller rights in the city. And Mary Robinson had been, before she'd been president, had been a barrister, and she represented the Casey family in Limerick, which basically resulted in a landmark accommodation rights case when in the High Court, which resulted in a site being built. And I remember the women from that part of the group, they wrote to her when she was president and asked her, would you come and visit? And she said yes. And I always remember that moment when she arrived and it was a big visit to the city, but she was coming to us. And it was just phenomenal. And I also remember Janice Sullivan as well as a TD. She was the mayor at the time, and the first formal reception for travellers, because we did a big arts project. And I actually met a partner of mine at the time. He was an artist there, and he actually died by suicide only two years ago, which is another story. But he was with this amazing creative work. And Jan put on this formal reception in the mayor in the civic reception for travellers in the city, and brought out I always remember brought the china, and oh my God, people, the pride, I'll never forget the pride in the community at that time.
So you tasted some, I suppose there were kind of victories in a sense. Now I know the battle continued and still does. I mean, even we mentioned suicide there, and like obviously we won't go into it too much, but like even in the traveller community, 700% higher. 700.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean it's,
so these struggles do continue.
Oh, absolutely. But you had to, like, along the way. I mean, and I also then, like, I was also really clear when I was working particularly in Limerick, that there's a lot of the solutions were at a policy level, at a government level. So we had to we have to work local and global. You have to work on the local issues, and you have to create the conditions for people to participate and to take action. But you've got to really target where the decision makers and challenge their policies. So I was very involved in setting up the National Traveller Women's Forum. I was very, very involved in the Irish Traveller Movement. Pavey Point, we were like collectivising all locally and nationally all of the time.
Tell me this: you seem to, you've done so much and you still do so much. How do you manage to segment your life, or maybe you don't? But like, how do you manage to still keep the fun? Is it because you keep the fun in your day-to-day work?
Yeah. Oh yeah, a bit of craziness. Yeah, I know, but it's so important to have fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's so important to like people. I mean, if people I'm working with, if I couldn't have a bit of fun, like if we couldn't see it's like connect.
Because you're dealing with really hard issues and sadness,
God,
and so to bring that joy into it.
You had to,
Tell me, how did you end up with the Migrant Rights Centre?
I went to the World Conference Against Racism in South Africa. Three weeks before, 3 weeks before September the 11th, and I was kind of really exposed to the whole kind of story of migration, what was happening around migration, and globally, like watching, meeting people, and it kind of really opened my eyes. And I came back and I was so profoundly upset by what had happened at that World Conference Against Racism. It was so divisive. All the hate in the world was being played out in a kind of like a fishbowl over 3 weeks. It was horrific. I mean, it was not any surprise that September the 11th happened very soon after that. I mean, it was just, I can't even go there. I still meet people who were there with me, and we kind of go, what happened there? It was just so divisive, horrible, ugly. So I came back and said, I have to leave my job. At that stage I was working with Community Workers Co-op. I have to leave, I need a change. So anyway, I came to Dublin, and a few people I knew, Stacia Quickly, Bobby Gilmer, they were starting up this information centre working with migrant workers. And that stage there was a lot of talk about asylum seekers, very little discussion about economic migrants. And anyway, I applied for the job, and it was one of those, like, it was a volunteer group basically, and I was going, I got the job, and it was like complete chaos because there was nothing there was no infrastructure, there was nothing.
Yeah, there was a basic shell, and you got the job, and then you're like, you are the organisation.
We had a basement.
You're the only staff? Or?
The only staff.
Okay, yeah. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and a group of people who were volunteers, mainly religious, and which brought its own challenges. And
does Stacia or Bobby, one or both of those are from religious communities, are they?
Bobby is a priest, Columban.
Because it does strike me that, I mean, there are definitely issues in and around the church, which again is a wider discussion, but it is another thread that goes through the world of community and social justice that there are amazing priests.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, obviously the route to take. If I had been born in the 40s and 50s, there's a good chance I probably would have done that.
And there was a paycheck in it.
So
you got to work.
Oh my God!
Building this.
Oh Jesus! It was like unreal. It was like, so basically it was like this. We used to have a queue of people in the door every day, and we're like, what are we doing? We were making it up as we went along.
Well, migration had only really started.
It was only really starting. The entire system.
Nobody knew anything.
Nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
So we just learned very quickly that you just had to be a hair's breadth ahead of the system.
Yeah.
So you would ring up and you would say, well, if you would you consider doing this? Or if I wrote a letter, if I got a letter from somebody, would that be whatever acceptable or whatever? And we realised that actually all of this was working.
Yeah.
We were kind of going, oh, okay, and we realised we got very creative in how we got solutions for people to become regularised or work every kind of an issue. But again, like that was all very individualised work. It's about individual problems, and I realised really quickly. I always remember being in Stacey's house the very first evening of my first day in that job, and kind of going blown over. I was completely blown away by the whole, like even just that first day, and I realised, oh my God, people are being victimised by the rules and the lack of rules and the lack of clarity, but they don't want to be victims. They don't see themselves as victims. They don't want to be victims, but they're being victimised, and that tension. Like where people are really powerless very often in a really harsh, broken system, but had spirit to do something about it. And I kept seeing it, even that first day I saw it. So we began to collectivise. So we began to bring people together as groups, domestic workers, as begin to share experiences. Workers in different kind of contexts. We started taking legal cases. I was representing people in the workers, the LRC. We were doing everything and anything. We were getting to know who were the over in the immigration office, figuring out where was the best place to go, what time of the day. We were beginning to, we began to get realised we need to get to the root of some of these problems here. So we began to pose solutions. So what we would do was try and create a practice. So for example, if you'd lost your work permit, but if you got a letter from us and you had a new employer, immigration would give you the stamp, right? So we were like, so this is on a case-by-case basis. So let's maybe formalise this. So then we came up with a solution for if you became undocumented through no fault of your own. It was called a bridging visa. That at that stage, if you were undocumented and it was nothing to do with you, as in your employer never applied for your work permit and you didn't even know about it, there was nothing you could be done for you. And I remember we were saying we have to campaign on this. Now, we'd never used the word campaigning before. It was like those days, early noughties, people didn't talk like that, So it just kind of now is so we're used to it. But in those days, people didn't talk like that. So we'd say, well, actually, we need a policy solution to this problem, and we're going to push for it. And I remember we used to be laughed at by the policymakers, the civil servants, and also some of our colleagues in civil society who just couldn't get their heads around that you actually had to change the system in order to get to the root of it. And we just were persistent. And I remember a senior civil servant who's just recently retired, saying about the Migrant Rights Centre that one of the things that he really admired about us was that we were persistent but pragmatic. That we never gave up, but we were really clear what the solution was. We were, that we needed.
Yeah, you're solution focused. Yeah, I can see that.
And we built leaders and built leadership. So basically, we didn't try and claim some massive space, which was false. We said, actually, this is the experience of the people that we're working with. We have it documented, and the people are speaking about it themselves.
Yeah.
So we didn't overclaim things. So I think nearly every campaign that we set out to win over that 10-year period, we nearly won.
It's incredible.
Yeah, which was amazing. Actually, the taste of victory.
Yeah, the taste of victory keeps you going.
Oh Jesus!
Because there's many failures as well.
Oh my God, so many. But I was like, oh wow! Like I realised, but people power. That's when I really got into this idea. This works. So here we're working with migrant workers who are, as I say, live and work on the edge, who don't have any political capital in the traditional sense, can't vote, for example. Often, like English is their second language, are working in what we call the 3D jobs, the dirty, dangerous, and difficult jobs, are very often invisible they're out of community. They're not part of the local community.
Yeah, they're quite often working during the night.
Yeah, they're completely marginalised.
Yeah.
But when you create the conditions for people to participate, when you create the conditions for people to become empowered, to be empowered, and then you create the conditions for collective action, and you're clear what's the change you're looking for, change happens.
So that leads us perfectly into the next evolution, which became the world of Uplift, and that's probably when I started connecting with you more. And I think the Migrant Rights Centre, I don't know, it's a significant organisation nationally in Ireland, but at that stage before you left, you left it with maybe 20 staff or...
No,
10, 15, I don't know.
Yeah, well there's I think about 11 or 12, yeah.
Okay, right. Well, which is significant in the Irish context.
Yeah,
it's pretty big.
Yeah.
But certainly like huge reputation, a great base, and you were leaving it in good shape as far as I could say, but you were kind of getting itchy, is that correct?
Yeah.
Getting a bit itchy to bring this people power journey, and then sort of fate and fortune and a few things collided that ourselves and Ben Branzel and some different people got round the table, and Ireland's gone through deep austerity, there's injustice and corruption left, right and centre. We know digital technology is one of the ways we can organise, and basically as far as I'm concerned you jumped in and said, right, I was freaked out, to be honest with you. I mean, I was up for it, but there was a moment where somebody had to get in and get their hands dirty, and you jumped right in 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like I think this is a nursing experience actually. I have a really great resilience.
The A&E ward.
I'm used to working in less than ideal situations. I knew I wanted to kind of, I suppose, move on at some stage. You know, like MSC was an amazing team. It's very collective, the team was very collective, and I suppose that I'm a kind of an initiator of things, as opposed to the long haul. I get bored.
But you've been there for a while.
I was there 12 years, but we kept reinventing ourselves, and that's what kept and also guys kept getting involved in new things, completely outside of work as well.
So tell people listening now, how we come up with Uplift and why, what it is, because not everyone will know.
Well, I suppose, for me, I got, over the years, I kind of realised, oh my God, there is such power in campaigning when it's really clear, purposeful, when it's people driven, when I just knew what it was like to win campaigns. I'd won campaign. I've been part of winning campaigns. I've seen governments capitulate on hardline policies because they had to, because we just wouldn't give up. Or create new laws when people were around us were saying, "But you can't do that." I said, "Well, why not? Of course you can." And then around that time, we both met through Ben Branzel, who'd worked with Move On and a couple of things. It was really kind of an amazing campaigner.
He's kind of like the high priest of
it's Johnny Appleseed of global campaigning, because he used to go around the world basically reaching out to people like us. People
would know avaz.org and moveon.org, and Ben's originally from Berkeley and was one of the real early guys on all of this, so he flew around the world kind of connecting with, he was a talent spotter in some ways and an opportunity, and then he'd kind of pollinate.
Yeah, and I met.
He's not a high priest; he's a rabbi.
Yeah, he is. Actually, that's true. And I met Ben on a Sunday night in a pub. Basically, it was the only time we could meet, and there was the minimum wage was basically been cut. And I knew there was this massive meeting the following day. I knew I'd called the meeting and I hadn't a clue what to do about what was going to happen. All these people were going to turn up to fight this, and I thought, because I knew we had to fight, you know. And I asked Ben to come to the meeting, and he came, and within 3 hours we had a campaign going, and we changed the narrative around minimum wage cut. The cut went through, but it was the first thing that the new government reversed a few months later. But I just, in those 3 days, I saw the potential of digital.
That was a petition.
Tools.
I think there was 10,000 signatures within hours.
Within hours.
Yeah.
And this is none of us had done anything like this before. But it was also what I could see was that actually this was a way of giving an opportunity for people who were hurting and wanted to react, something to do, and pull them in, and they felt that they were part of something, and it was being heard. The politicians were feeling the heat, and I was like, wow, can you imagine if we could keep doing this and we could do more of it? So I went and spent some time with 38 Degrees, a few weeks in 38 Degrees, which is the kind of the UK equivalent.
Yeah, because there's almost like a global family of these organisations in Australia.
Yeah, get up in Australia.
So many countries, yeah.
And so I spent some time there and learned, kind of saw it in action, and I went, okay, this is what we could do in Ireland. And so it just took time to get going, but...
Well, it did, but we're 2 years down the road now, and it was last night we had a board meeting, and as we were in the board meeting, Uplift was involved in a campaign, and it was trending as the number one trend in the country. There's over 100,000 members. There's only a small team of 3 staff, but there are 3 staff that are being paid not that much. There's an office, there's a national reputation, government representatives are referencing Uplift, the media are referencing Uplift. For me, it's landing. Now, it still hasn't clicked for everybody, but those in particularly, I feel like, there was a guy on the radio who lost his wife. She drowned as she was in search and rescue volunteer. And I heard her husband talking about an Uplift petition, and I think I heard it the same day in a different context, and it just was coming at me, but just as me driving around, I was hearing it come back. But I know that, like, the 2 years, we talked at one stage about the valley of debt. I don't know if you remember that conversation. So any startup, enterprise or initiative, in the science will tell you, and it's probably true, that it has to go through this valley of debt where it nearly dies several times, and you lose. I have moments of almost going, Jesus.
It's not going to work,
And there was moments where wages maybe weren't paid, or there was many kind of voluntary wage reductions and no wages and all of that. And that's kind of that resilience, tough nut stuff where you're just going, right.
Dig in. Yeah, tough get going. We dig in. I just love the fact. I've always believed in people and people power and leadership. I was always it really irritates me when they talk about leadership as if leadership is something from on high that's handed down. I look around me and I see leaders everywhere. I remember like my own Luke, and when he was 7 or 8 in the class, in standing up against bullies in the school and reporting bullying, and I remember thinking that's leadership. And my neighbours talking about, just really huge humanity in them, and I just see it everywhere, and I think, wow, and you think about all the community gardens and the festivals, and there's a huge resurgence of kind of community activity right across Ireland, and a disconnect though from the formal politics of where power is centred in terms of that kind of formal way, and I was thinking, well, we need to tap into this. We can tap into it, and we started in December. They ended the week before Christmas, December 2014, and we had 300 people on an email list, and now with 200. Nearly 250,000 people have taken an action with Uplift over the last nearly 2 years. We have over 100,000 opted in members. So it's fairly significant, in terms of this percentage of the population.
It's 2% of the population.
Yeah. But just that idea of that there are so many people who give a shit basically, who do want to see a better and be part of fighting for a better Ireland, don't necessarily see themselves as political or like activists in the big capital A or the capital P way, but are basic decent people who kind of like to be connected to something that actually reflects their values. And it's happening. Like we are growing. We have become the community that we, as a group of people, sat around the table with a vision. We're actually becoming that community. I get emails and calls from members who talk about, I think we should do this now, and talk about we, and they own it, and I always remember, and I wish I could play you this woman, 70-year-old woman ringing me on her birthday there during the summer from somewhere in West Cork, leaving me a message to tell me how proud she was to be part of this community. And this was a woman, I rang her back, and this is a woman who on her 70th birthday she got a TTIP poster from us, and by a pure accident. And this woman is not, like, she's just not in any way part of the political process in the traditional sense. She's just a woman who loves making brown bread every day and is part of her own local community, and she just loves being connected and being part of the Uplift community, and picked up the phone to tell me that, and that she made me cry, because there's people like that everywhere, and I think, wow, like when you can connect people like that, when you can make it possible for people to come together and be connected and feel that they're be visible and feel powerful, like something good's happening.
I think that's an important note to end on, because we live in very challenging times, but as you've referenced, there's always challenges, and you just get stuck in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when Trump won in the US, and we asked Uplift members how do they feel, and we got hundreds and hundreds of messages, and the main kind of the dominant message back was, well, we need to stand closer together, we need to pull stronger together, we need to fight back, we need to stand up for what we believe in, we need to put our values even more up front, we need to, it was a message of resilience, and we're not down, it's not over, we have to fight stronger, we're stronger together. And that was when I was so depressed. I mean, I spent a few days, I'd say, crying, and I got so much hope from those messages.
Stronger together.
Stronger together.
Thanks, Siobhán. It's been a pleasure. Hello, Rory here again. If you like this interview, can you please help let others know about it by sharing it on social media and wherever you can. There are lots more great interviews in the archive, so check them out if you haven't heard them already, and there are lots more in the pipeline. If you want to help sustain and grow this podcast and be part of the Love and Courage community, you can become a once-off or a monthly patron by chipping in online at loveandcourage.org, and feel free to drop me an email anytime to podcast@loveandcourage.org. Thanks so much for all your support, it really makes a big difference, and here's to you and to your courageous journey in the world. Until next time.